The Emergency Council of the Supreme Galactic Authority for Definitive Conquests was having what could generously be called a spectacular meltdown. Commander Vex Karloth, a 7-foot purple bureaucrat whose species had evolved thumbs specifically for filing paperwork, was frantically shuffling through reports, while his 3 eyes blinked in completely different patterns, a sure sign of advanced panic among the Trilaxians. 12 units! He shrieked, his voice cracking like a teenager asking someone to prom. 12 of our finest military assets gone, vanished, not even a postcard. The circular chamber, designed to accommodate 17 different atmospheric requirements and at least 43 distinct gravitational preferences, hummed with the nervous energy of the galaxy's most expensive failures. General Klobnik 577, whose mechanical body clicked and whirred with each emotional fluctuation, processed the data for the 47th time in the past hour. The probability calculations are disturbing, Klobnik announced, his voice synthesizer adding an ominous echo that nobody had figured out how to turn off. Earth has a 0.0001% success rate for military operations. We should have conquered that mudball in approximately 12 minutes. Admiral Fliswick, who resembled what would happen if someone crossed a jellyfish with a tax auditor, pulsed an alarming shade of crimson. Gentle beings, we need to face the horrifying truth. Earth is... He paused dramatically, his translucent form quivering with emotion. Unconquerable. The word hung in the recycled atmosphere like a fart in an elevator. Dr. Morblix Grex, the Council's chief xenopsychologist, whose species communicated primarily through interpretive dance, performed what could only be described as the choreographic equivalent of a nervous breakdown. His tentacles spelled out complex equations in sign language, while his lower appendages tapped out a rhythm that roughly translated to, "We're all doomed." Now, Commander Vex Karloth said, though his confidence had the structural integrity of a chocolate teapot. Let's review the facts before we panic any further. He activated the holographic display, which immediately crashed, rebooted itself, displayed an advertisement for galactic dating services, and finally showed a rather unflattering 3-dimensional image of Earth spinning lazily in space, like a cosmic meatball. Target Earth, 3rd planet from an unremarkable star. Population approximately 8 billion humanoids. Technological level, pathetically primitive. Military capability. Vex Karloth's voice dropped to a whisper. Non-existent by galactic standards. General Klobnik's processors whirred louder. Yet somehow they've achieved what no other species in recorded history has managed. They've made our elite forces simply disappear. The first unit to vanish had been the Stellar Devastators, led by Captain Grimjaw Murderface, whose name had been legally changed from his birth name of Fluffy Buttercup after a particularly embarrassing incident involving a children's entertainment complex on Rigel 7. The Devastators specialized in intimidation through excessive violence and had conquered 47 worlds by simply showing up and looking menacing. They'd lasted exactly 6 hours on Earth. The second unit, the Psychological Warfare Specialists, under the command of Major Brainfry Nightmare, had developed techniques so advanced they could drive entire civilizations insane by rearranging their furniture. Their ships had landed near something called Las Vegas, and their last transmission had been a confused report about humans who seemed to enjoy psychological torture and pay money for it. That was 3 weeks ago. The Quantum Infiltrators, led by the legendary Colonel Shadowstep Invisible, had never failed a stealth mission. They could become one with darkness itself, phase through solid matter, and remained undetected even by the most advanced scanning equipment. Their final communication had been a panicked message. Request immediate extraction. Humans have discovered our presence. They're trying to feed us. Admiral Fliswick's form shifted to a nauseating shade of green. The Devastators, the Psychological Specialists, the Infiltrators, all gone, and that was just the first wave. Commander Vex Karloth nodded grimly. The second wave wasn't any better. The biotechnic assimilators, the plasma cores elite, the dark matter manipulators, and the temporal disruption unit vanished, every single one. The biotechnic assimilators had been particularly confident. Led by General Technovirus, they specialized in converting conquered populations into cybernetic slaves. Their last transmission had been a confused status report. Humans are voluntarily installing our control devices. They call them social media apps and seem delighted by the mind control. We don't understand the victory conditions. The Plasma Corps elite had simply stopped responding after landing near something called Florida. Their tracking signals had led to a place called Disney World, after which all surveillance had gone mysteriously silent. The only evidence of their presence had been a series of photographs showing what appeared to be elite alien warriors wearing mouse ears and posing with human children. Dr. Morblix Grex performed an intricate dance that roughly translated to, "How is this possible?" General Klobnik's circuits sparked with frustration. The third wave was our absolute best. The Void Hunters, the Cosmic Dread Brigade, the Apocalypse Bringers, and the... He paused, his voice modulator stuttering with disbelief. The Universal Extinction Force. The Universal Extinction Force, led by the feared Overlord Doomskull Catastrophe, had never left survivors. Their standard operating procedure involved destroying entire solar systems just to make a point. They had been responsible for the complete annihilation of the Krellian Empire, the Zorthak Republic, and most memorably, the peaceful meditation collective of Zen 9. Their last message had been a single word: help! Commander Vex Karloth's bureaucratic training kicked in, and he began reading from his official report in the monotone voice that had made him famous across 17 sectors. Unit deployment timeline. The Stellar Devastators landed at coordinates designated New York City at Galactic Standard Time 1427. Last contact, 6 hours, 43 minutes later. The Psychological Warfare Specialists touched down at Las Vegas, Nevada, at 1509, communication ceased after 72 hours. Admiral Fliswick's transparency fluctuated with anxiety. And the quantum infiltrators? Tokyo, Japan, gone in 36 hours, but here's where it gets weird. Vex Karloth's voice cracked again. They all reported the same thing before disappearing. The humans weren't afraid of them. A shocked silence filled the chamber, broken only by the gentle humming of life support systems and Dr. Morblix Grex's tentacles slowly spelling out profanity in 17 different languages. General Klobnik processed this information at maximum speed. Fear is the foundation of all successful conquests. Without fear, how does one establish dominance? Exactly! Vex Karloth shouted, waving his arms with the enthusiasm of someone who had just solved intergalactic peace, but immediately realized it would put him out of a job. The humans displayed what our xenopsychologists have classified as inappropriate curiosity and aggressive friendliness. The second wave's fate had been even more baffling. The biotechnic assimilators had landed in Silicon Valley, expecting to find primitive humans ripe for technological subjugation. Instead, they discovered a species that was already voluntarily merging with their devices and seemed genuinely excited about the prospect of cybernetic enhancement. Their final report had been a philosophical crisis. Mission parameters unclear. Humans appear to be assimilating themselves. Request guidance on how to conquer a species that wants to be conquered, but in ways we didn't expect, and for reasons we don't understand. The Plasma Corps elite had touched down at Walt Disney World during something called Spring Break. The park's security cameras had recorded what could only be described as elite galactic shock troops being systematically broken down by hyperactive human younglings, demanding autographs, photographs, and explanations of where their spacesuits came from. Their commanding officer, General Blastfire Annihilation, had been spotted 3 days later working as a costumed character, apparently having suffered what military psychiatrists classified as a complete psychological reformation through aggressive human enthusiasm. The dark matter manipulators had attempted to establish a base of operations in what humans called Area 51, assuming it would be a secret military installation where they could work undisturbed. Instead, they'd encountered hundreds of humans who seemed delighted to see them, and had immediately begun asking for tours, interviews, and something called selfies. Their last transmission had been a confused request. Are we being interviewed by their media? They seem to think we're supposed to be here. Several humans have offered us book deals. But it was the fate of the Temporal Disruption Unit that had truly shaken the Council. Led by General Kronos Paradox, they had attempted to establish temporal dominance by arriving yesterday, tomorrow, and next Thursday simultaneously. Their plan had been to conquer Earth before humans had evolved, thus preventing any resistance. They'd materialized in the middle of something called a science fiction convention, where thousands of humans had immediately recognized them as really awesome cosplayers and had begun asking detailed questions about their special effects and where they'd bought their costumes. The unit's temporal field generators had been overwhelmed by what scientists later described as weaponized enthusiasm, causing them to become stuck in a causal loop where they were perpetually being asked to pose for photographs with humans dressed as characters from something called Star Trek. Admiral Fliswick's form turned a deep purple. But surely the third wave, the extinction force. Commander Vex Karloth's file shuffling reached panic levels. The Void Hunters landed in Australia, expecting to find a continent full of dangerous predators they could use as hunting practice. Instead, they encountered humans who seemed to think their ship was pretty neat and offered them barbecue. The locals apparently assumed they were foreign tourists and began giving them directions to the nearest pub. "Or the Cosmic Dread Brigade," he continued, his voice getting higher with each unit, attempted to establish psychological dominance by landing in what their intelligence reports indicated was a feared location of death and despair. It turned out to be something called Detroit during a Renaissance festival. The humans welcomed them as really committed LARPers and invited them to join their guild. General Klobnik's processors were running so hot they began to smoke. And the Apocalypse Bringers? Portland, Oregon. They've apparently become vegans and started a small business selling what they call artisanal doomsday devices. Their Yelp reviews are excellent. The chamber fell silent except for the sound of Dr. Morblick's Grex slowly having what could only be described as an interpretive dance seizure. "Which brings us," Vex Karloth said with the tone of someone reading his own death sentence, "to the Universal Extinction Force." The Universal Extinction Force had been the Council's final gambit. Led by Overlord Doomskull Catastrophe, whose very name had once caused 3 solar systems to surrender preemptively, they had landed with enough firepower to crack a moon and enough psychological warfare equipment to drive entire species to madness. They had touched down in the middle of something called Burning Man. Their final transmission, Vex Karloth read from his official report, his voice barely above a whisper, was Overlord Doomskull Catastrophe saying, and I quote, "These humans have achieved levels of creative chaos that surpass our most advanced psychological torture techniques. They seem to consider existential dread a recreational activity. We don't know what to do with this information." That had been 6 weeks ago. Admiral Fliswick pulsed weakly. But we received one survivor, didn't we? From the biotechnic assimilators. "Ah, yes," Vex Karloth said, brightening slightly. "Junior Technician Beep Bloop Error managed to escape. He's waiting outside." General Klobnik's mechanical head swiveled. "Bring him in. Perhaps he can explain this anomaly." The chamber doors, which had been designed to inspire awe and terror in equal measure, slid open with a dramatic whoosh. Junior technician Beep Bloop Error shuffled in, and it was immediately apparent that his encounter with humanity had left its mark. Beep Bloop Error had once been a standard biotechnic assimilator, with gleaming chrome appendages, a neural interface crown, and the cold, calculating demeanor of a professional military cyborg. Now, he wore what appeared to be a T-shirt that read, "I survived San Francisco and all I got was this lousy T-shirt and a crippling addiction to sourdough bread." His chrome had been painted with colorful patterns. His neural crown was adorned with what appeared to be small decorative flowers, and he moved with the shell-shocked shuffle of someone who had seen too much and understood too little. "Junior technician," Commander Vex Karloff said gently, "please tell the Council what happened to your unit." Beep Bloop Error's optical sensors flickered as he processed the question. "Sir, we followed standard protocol. We landed, established a perimeter, began scanning for the planetary defense grid." His voice had a slight tremor that was definitely not factory standard. "And then, the humans. They welcomed us, sir. They seemed genuinely excited to meet us. Several approached our position carrying what our sensors identified as potential weapons." General Klobnik leaned forward. "Weapons? Coffee, sir? And something called artisanal donuts. They wanted to share them with us." Admiral Fliswick's form quivered. "Share? But you're invaders." "That's what we told them, sir. We announced our intention to assimilate their species and convert their planet into a cybernetic processing center. They seemed to think this was fascinating and began asking technical questions about our neural integration protocols." Dr. Morblix Grex performed a small dance that roughly translated to, "What the actual hell?" Beep Bloop Error continued, his voice getting stronger as he warmed to his subject. "One human who identified herself as Dr. Jennifer Hammerstrike Quantum, though I suspect that might not have been her real name, seemed particularly interested in our biotechnology. She asked if we could help her with something called graduate school applications." Idle. The council members exchanged glances that conveyed volumes of confusion. She explained that she was studying bioengineering with a focus on human-machine interfaces, and thought our presence was either an incredible coincidence or the universe's way of telling her she was on the right track. She offered to show us her research in exchange for what she called alien perspective on cybernetic ethics. Commander Vex Karloff made a note. "Did you assimilate her?" "We tried, sir. But when we attached the neural interface to her head, instead of screaming in terror or being instantly converted to our cause, she said it was really interesting and asked if we could adjust the bandwidth because she was getting some fascinating data, but the connection felt a bit laggy." General Klobnik's circuit sparked. "Laggy?" "Apparently human brains process information in ways our assimilation protocols weren't designed for. Instead of overwriting her consciousness, the interface started learning from her. Within 6 hours, our entire unit had developed what can only be described as human curiosity and an inexplicable desire to try something called burritos." The chamber fell silent except for the hum of air recyclers and Admiral Fliswick's horrified pulsing. "Sir," Beep Bloop Error continued, "I don't think the humans are unconquerable because they're strong. I think they're unconquerable because they don't understand they're supposed to be conquered. They just adapt, and then they try to include you in their adaptation process." Dr. Morblix Grex's tentacles formed what might have been question marks or possibly obscene gestures. His species' sign language was notoriously ambiguous. "The stellar devastators," Beep Bloop Error said, as if reading the doctor's mind, "landed in New York and tried to establish dominance through intimidation. The humans assumed they were either a publicity stunt or performance art and began leaving reviews on something called Google. Captain Grimjaw Murderface was rated 4.7 stars with comments like, 'Really committed to the bit and would recommend for corporate team-building events.'" Commander Vex Karloff's eye stalks drooped. "And the psychological warfare specialists. They tried to drive the Las Vegas population insane through subtle mental manipulation. The humans didn't notice because, according to their own cultural documentation, Las Vegas was already designed to drive people insane, and they seemed to consider this a feature rather than a bug. Major Brainfry Nightmare's last report indicated he was having an existential crisis about the nature of reality and had been offered a job as a creative consultant for something called Cirque du Soleil. Admiral Fliswick's transparency was approaching dangerous levels. But surely the extinction force... Beep Bloop Error's optical sensors dimmed. Sir, the humans at Burning Man assumed Overlord Doomskull Catastrophe was an art installation representing humanity's relationship with cosmic mortality. They nominated him for something called Best Interactive Experience and kept asking him to explain the deeper meaning behind his death aesthetic. When he tried to demonstrate his planet-destroying capabilities by vaporizing a small mountain, they applauded and asked if he took commissions. Apparently, someone wanted him to create a controlled demolition for their gender reveal party. The council sat in stunned silence. General Klobnik's cooling fans whirred at maximum speed. Admiral Fliswick had turned completely transparent. Dr. Morblix Grex was performing what could only be described as the choreographic equivalent of a mental breakdown. Commander Vex Karloth cleared his throat, which in Trilaxian physiology sounded like a file cabinet being opened by a particularly depressed bureaucrat. Junior technician, in your opinion, what would it take to successfully conquer Earth? Beep Bloop Error's optical sensors flickered as he processed the question. Sir, I believe the only way to conquer humanity would be to convince them that being conquered was boring and ordinary. Something that everyone was already doing, and that wasn't worth their attention. But, sir, he continued, his voice dropping to a whisper, I also believe that if you managed to do that, they would immediately become interested in not being conquered, and would probably invent new and creative ways to resist that would make our current situation seem simple by comparison. The chamber fell into the kind of silence usually reserved for funeral services and tax audits. General Klobnik's mechanical mind processed this information for several long minutes before finally speaking. So you're saying that humanity is unconquerable because they refuse to be conquered in any way we understand? No, sir, Beep Bloop Error replied. I'm saying humanity is unconquerable because they don't recognize conquest as a valid concept. They just think everything is either interesting, boring, or an opportunity to try something new. Admiral Fliswick managed to solidify enough to speak. But what happened to all our forces? Where are they? Beep Bloop Error's posture brightened considerably. Oh, they're fine, sir. Most of them have found what humans call jobs. Captain Grimjaw Murderface is doing quite well in what they call professional wrestling. Major Brainfry Nightmare has a successful career in advertising. Oh, the quantum infiltrators have become food bloggers, whatever that means. The biotechnic assimilators have started a technology company. Apparently, human venture capitalists were very interested in cybernetic enhancement research. The Plasma Core elite have found employment at Disney World. They seem to enjoy making human younglings happy, which is apparently the complete opposite of their original programming. Dr. Morblix Grex performed what might have been either a dance of joy or a complete psychological collapse. The Void Hunters have opened a restaurant specializing in exotic meats. Turns out humans will eat almost anything if you present it properly. The Cosmic Dread Brigade have become motivational speakers, helping humans confront their fears through what they call extreme team-building exercises. No, Commander Vex Karloth's 3 eyes were blinking in perfect synchronization, a sign of either deep contemplation or complete mental shutdown. The Apocalypse Bringers have found their calling in environmental activism. Apparently, humans are already working on multiple ways to end their civilization, and were happy to have professional consultation. The Temporal Disruption Unit are working as consultants for something called Hollywood, helping with what humans term time travel movie plots. General Klobnik's processors were making sounds that definitely hadn't been in the warranty documentation. And the extinction force? Beep bloop error's optical sensors actually brightened. Oh, Overlord Doomskull Catastrophe has become quite popular. He's created what humans call an art collective, focused on exploring themes of mortality and cosmic insignificance through interactive installations. His work has been featured in several major galleries, and he's been invited to give a lecture at something called TED Talks. The silence that followed was so profound that the chamber's audio sensors began automatically adjusting their sensitivity, thinking they had malfunctioned. Finally, Commander Vex Karloth spoke, his voice carrying the weight of someone who had just realized that his entire career had been based on a fundamental misunderstanding of how the universe worked. Junior Technician, are you telling this council that 12 of our most elite military units have been employed by the species they were sent to conquer? Not just employed, sir. From what I could observe, they seem happy. Most of them have what humans call health benefits and something called vacation time. Several have started what humans term families, though I'm not entirely sure how that works with their original species biology. Admiral Fliswick's form had stabilized into a shade of blue that indicated either deep philosophical contemplation or complete mental breakdown. But how do we report this to the High Command? Dr. Morblix suddenly stopped dancing and stood perfectly still, his tentacles forming what was unmistakably the sign language equivalent of a light bulb appearing over someone's head. His tentacles moved rapidly, spelling out a complex message that the chamber's translation system rendered as, "What if we don't report it? What if we simply declare Earth a classified research project and never speak of this again?" General Klobnik's mechanical head turned to face the doctor. "You're suggesting we cover up the greatest military failure in galactic history, Doctor?" Morblix-Grex's tentacles danced affirmatively, then spelled out, "I'm suggesting we classify this as a long-term cultural infiltration mission and declare it an ongoing success. Technically, we have successfully placed 12 units in deep cover positions within human society." Commander Vex Karloth's bureaucratic mind began working overtime. That could actually work. We could file it under Extended Reconnaissance Operations and mark it as Classified Ongoing. Admiral Fliswick pulsed hopefully. "And if anyone asks about the missing units?" "They're not missing," Vex Karloth said, his confidence returning with the promise of paperwork that made sense. "They're embedded, deep cover, so deep that they've assumed complete local identities for operational security purposes." General Klobnik's cooling systems finally began to quiet down. "It's brilliant in its simplicity. We turn our greatest failure into our most successful infiltration operation." Beep bloop error raised one chrome appendage. "Sir, there is one small problem with this plan." The council members turned to him with expressions of barely contained panic. "The humans know we're here. In fact, they've been expecting us." The temperature in the chamber seemed to drop several degrees. "Expecting us?" Commander Vex Karloth squeaked. "Yes, sir. Apparently, they have an entire cultural mythology about alien visitors and have been preparing for first contact for decades. They have protocols, sir. Official protocols." Admiral Fliswick's form began to flicker rapidly. "Protocols. They call it the Universal Greeting and Welcome Initiative. They've prepared welcome packages, sir, with maps, local cuisine recommendations and translation guides. They seemed disappointed that we didn't follow what they call proper first contact etiquette." Dr. Morblix-Grex's tentacles were moving so fast they were creating small whirlwinds in the chamber's atmosphere. "Several human governments have already filed formal complaints about our invasion protocol being culturally insensitive and lacking in basic diplomatic courtesy. They've requested that future contact be arranged through something called the United Nations Office for Outer Space Affairs." Commander Vex Karloth felt his bureaucratic soul die a little. They want us to fill out forms? Yes, sir. Apparently they have a whole department dedicated to managing extraterrestrial relations. They were quite upset that we didn't follow proper channels and have suggested that all future military operations be reclassified as cultural exchange programs and scheduled through their appropriate governmental liaisons. The council sat in stunned silence as the full implications of this revelation sank in. General Klobnik spoke first, his voice barely above a mechanical whisper. You're telling us that not only did we fail to conquer Earth, but we did it impolitely? According to several strongly worded letters from something called the International Diplomatic Corps, yes, sir, they've also suggested that we might want to consider sensitivity training for our military personnel. Admiral Fliswick had turned completely colorless. Sensitivity training? For cross-cultural communication, sir. They've offered to provide instructors. Commander Vex Karloth stared at his paperwork as if it might spontaneously combust and save him from this conversation. Junior technician, what exactly do the humans want from us? Beep Bloop Error's optical sensors brightened with what could only be described as enthusiasm. They want to be friends, sir. They're very excited about the possibility of interstellar cultural exchange and sharing knowledge for the betterment of all sentient species. They've prepared what they call gift baskets for our high command, with local delicacies, cultural artifacts, and something called a really nice card with everyone's signatures. They seem to think that first contact should be celebrated with what they term a proper welcome party. The chamber's atmospheric recycling system seemed to be working overtime as the council members processed this information. Dr. Morblix-Grex's tentacles formed what was clearly a question mark. They want to know if we have any dietary restrictions, sir, and whether we prefer formal ceremonies or casual get-togethers. Apparently, they have extensive experience with what they call international diplomacy and are confident they can work something out that everyone will enjoy. General Klobnik's processors were running so many calculations that small sparks were beginning to emanate from his cranial unit. But we're a galactic military force. We don't do casual get-togethers. According to the humans, sir, that's exactly why we need them. They seem to think our military-first approach to diplomacy is unnecessarily stressful and have offered to teach us what they call conflict resolution through positive social interaction. Commander Vex Karloth's three eyes had stopped blinking entirely. They want to teach U.S. diplomacy? They've prepared a comprehensive training program, sir. It includes modules on active listening, cultural sensitivity, collaborative problem-solving, and something called trust-building through shared meals. Admiral Fliswick managed to solidify just enough to form what might have been a face. What do they want in return for this education? Beep Bloop Error's enthusiasm was becoming somewhat alarming. Nothing, sir. They seem to think that universal friendship is its own reward. Though they did mention they'd be very interested in our unique perspectives on galactic civilization, and wondered if we'd be willing to share some stories about our adventures among the stars. They're particularly excited about something they call xenobiology and comparative cultural studies. Several of their universities have offered to establish what they term exchange programs, where human students could learn about galactic civilization while our personnel could study human society. Dr. Morblix-Grex performed what was definitely the interpretive dance equivalent of throwing his hands up in complete surrender. They've also expressed interest in our technology, but not for military purposes. They want to know if we can help them with something called climate change and sustainable energy. Apparently, they're having some environmental problems and think a fresh perspective from space might be helpful. The council members stared at each other in the kind of stunned silence usually reserved for natural disasters and taxation deadlines. General Klobnik finally spoke, his voice carrying the mechanical equivalent of existential exhaustion. Let me understand this correctly. We sent 12 elite military units to conquer Earth. Instead of being conquered, the humans have recruited our forces, offered to educate our military and diplomacy, invited our high command to a welcome party, and asked if we'd like to help them solve their environmental problems. That's correct, sir. And they've filed formal complaints about our invasion technique being impolite? Yes, sir. And they want to establish student exchange programs between Earth and the Galactic Authority. They seem very enthusiastic about it, sir. Commander Vex Karloth slowly placed his head in his hands, which was anatomically challenging given that he had 3 eyes and 7 fingers, but he managed to make it work. Junior technician, he said wearily, in your professional opinion, what should our next course of action be? Beep bloop errors, optical sensors flickered thoughtfully. Sir, I believe our options are limited. We can either accept their invitation to establish formal diplomatic relations, or we can attempt to explain to the High Command why our most elite forces are now working in human entertainment, technology, and food service industries. Admiral Fliswick pulsed weakly. What about retreat, strategic withdrawal? Sir, the humans have already invited us to what they call a farewell party if we decide to leave. They've prepared gift bags and something called a really nice slideshow of our time on Earth. They seem to think we've all become friends. Dr. Morblix Grex's tentacles slowly formed what was clearly the sign for inevitable doom, followed immediately by, might as well enjoy it. General Klorbnik's mechanical systems let out a long, weary sigh that sounded like air being released from a hydraulic system. Very well. I hereby recommend that we accept the humans' invitation to establish formal diplomatic relations. Commander Vex Karloth looked up from his paperwork with an expression of someone who had just realized that his entire worldview was fundamentally flawed, but had decided to roll with it anyway. Seconded. Junior technician, please inform the humans that the Supreme Galactic Authority for Definitive Conquests would be honored to attend their welcome party. Should I mention that we'll need to change our name, sir? The humans seem to think Supreme Galactic Authority for Definitive Conquests sounded a bit aggressive for a diplomatic organization. Admiral Fliswick managed a weak pulse. What did they suggest? The Galactic Cultural Exchange and Friendship Initiative, sir. They've already designed a logo. It has stars and handshakes. The chamber fell into one final moment of silence as the council members contemplated their new reality. Dr. Morblix Grex performed a complex dance that roughly translated to, well, this is certainly not what I expected when I got up this morning, but I suppose stranger things have happened, though I can't actually think of any examples right now. Commander Vex Karloth straightened his papers with the resigned efficiency of someone who had just realized that the universe had a sense of humor, and he was the punchline. Very well. Meeting adjourned. Junior technician, please prepare a diplomatic response accepting the humans' invitation. And, he added with the tone of someone making peace with the inevitable, find out what they mean by potluck dinner and whether we need to bring anything. As the council members filed out of the chamber, each lost in their own thoughts about how to explain this situation to their respective superiors, Beep Bloop Error remained behind, updating his report. His final entry read, Mission status success. Earth has been successfully infiltrated by Galactic Authority personnel who have achieved deep cover positions in human society. Recommend continued operation under new designation, Cultural Exchange Initiative. Side note, humans make excellent coffee and seem genuinely interested in making friends. Advise all future contact be scheduled through proper diplomatic channels to avoid further complaints about etiquette violations. He paused, then added, P.S. Humans have invited me to something called Thanksgiving dinner next week. Apparently, it's a tradition where they gather to appreciate what they're grateful for. They said they're grateful for new friends from space and want to show their appreciation with food and something called football. Still unclear on mission relevance, but morale remains high. 3 months later, the Supreme Galactic Authority for Definitive Conquests had been quietly renamed the Galactic Cultural Exchange and Friendship Initiative, and Commander Vex Karloth found himself sitting in a conference room that had been redecorated with what humans called motivational posters, and a coffee machine that had somehow become the most important piece of equipment in the entire facility. The emergency council meetings had been replaced with what Dr. Jennifer Hammerstrike Quantum, who turned out to be a real person with a doctorate in bioengineering and a disturbing enthusiasm for bureaucratic reform, called collaborative planning sessions. "So," she said, consulting her tablet while sipping from a mug that read, "World's okayest xenobiologist, we've got the cultural exchange program running smoothly. Captain Grimjaw Murderface's wrestling career is apparently helping with Earth's entertainment industry, and his autobiography, From Stellar Devastation to Steel Chair Domination, is already a bestseller. General Klobnik, whose chassis had been upgraded with what humans called ergonomic improvements and was now painted a cheerful blue, processed this information with mechanical contentment. His merchandising revenue alone has exceeded the GDP of 12 minor galactic civilizations. Admiral Fliswick, who had learned to maintain a consistently pleasant shade of seafoam green, pulsed approvingly. The psychological warfare specialists have revolutionized the advertising industry. Major Brainfry Nightmare's campaign for something called energy drinks has achieved mind control levels that our original military protocols never dreamed of. Dr. Morblix Grex, whose interpretive dance had been refined into what humans called performance art, was currently spelling out what translated to profitable cultural synthesis while wearing what appeared to be a beret. The Quantum Infiltrator's food blog has gone viral, Dr. Hammerstrike Quantum continued. Their review of that new fusion restaurant in Tokyo crashed 3 servers and spawned what humans call a meme. Apparently, interdimensional perspective really helps with food criticism. Beep Bloop Error, who had been promoted to Director of Human Galactic Relations and wore a name tag that said, "Hello, my name is Beep, he, him," nodded enthusiastically. The Biotechnic Assimilators tech company just went public. Their cybernetic enhancement research is apparently disrupting the wearable technology sector in ways that even they don't fully understand. Commander Vex Karloth, whose bureaucratic instincts had found new purpose in what humans called project management, checked his color-coded spreadsheet. The Plasma Core Elite have been invited to expand their Disney operations to 3 additional theme parks. Their customer satisfaction ratings are, and I quote, "off the charts." The Void Hunters restaurant has received what humans call a Michelin star, Dr. Hammerstrike Quantum added. Apparently their approach to exotic cuisine has opened up entirely new culinary frontiers. Who knew that Andromedan swamp beast could be so delicious when properly seasoned? Admiral Fliswick pulsed with what might have been pride. The Cosmic Dread Brigade's motivational speaking tour has been booked solid for the next 18 months. Their seminar, Confronting Existential Terror for Personal Growth, has a waiting list of over 10,000 humans. The Apocalypse Bringers have been nominated for something called a Nobel Prize for their environmental work, General Klobnik announced, his mechanical voice carrying what could only be described as paternal pride. Apparently, their expertise in planetary destruction has given them unique insights into planetary preservation. Dr. Morblix Grex performed a small, celebratory dance that roughly translated to, "Irony is the universe's favorite form of humor." "And the Temporal Disruption Unit?" Commander Vex Karloth asked. "Oh, they're doing fantastic," Dr. Hammerstrike Quantum said, with the enthusiasm of someone who had discovered a new and fascinating form of mathematics. Their consulting work has revolutionized Hollywood's approach to time travel narratives. They've eliminated more plot holes in 6 months than the industry had managed in decades. Plus, Beep Bloop Error added, their temporal field research has opened up new possibilities for human space exploration. Apparently, their technology might help solve something called faster-than-light travel, though they're being very careful about the causality implications. Admiral Fliswick's form brightened considerably. And Overlord Doomskull Catastrophe? His TED Talk broke viewing records, Dr. Hammerstrike Quantum said with genuine admiration. His presentation on finding beauty in cosmic insignificance has been watched by over 50 million humans. He's been invited to speak at universities, art galleries, and something called Burning Man again next year. He's also started what humans call a podcast, Beep Bloop Error added. It's called Conversations with Doom, and he interviews humans about their perspectives on mortality, meaning, and what they call the human condition. It's surprisingly philosophical. General Klobnik's processors hummed with satisfaction. Has there been any word from the High Command about our situation? Commander Vex Karloth's expression brightened. Actually, yes. We received an official communiqué yesterday. The High Command has declared our operation a paradigm-shifting success and has requested detailed reports on our innovative approach to cultural integration. They want to implement similar programs with other species. Admiral Fliswick asked. Apparently, 12 other galactic civilizations have experienced similar diplomatic complications with species they attempted to conquer. The High Command is now calling it the Friendship Protocol and wants us to develop training materials. Dr. Morblix Grex's tentacles formed what was clearly an exclamation point, followed by a question mark. The Zephyrian Empire tried to conquer a species called the Wiblonians, Vex Karloth explained, but apparently the Wiblonians responded to their invasion by adopting Zephyrian military technology for something they call competitive gardening. The Zephyrians are now helping them develop the most aesthetically pleasing sustainable agriculture in the galaxy. The Krellian Republic encountered a similar situation with the Floorblings, who turned their invasion into what they called an unexpected opportunity for cultural enrichment. The Krellians are now running what amounts to a galactic bed and breakfast. Beep Bloop Error's optical sensors flickered with amusement. It seems that humans aren't unique in their approach to aggressive hospitality. They're just particularly good at it. Dr. Hammerstrike Quantum grinned. Actually, we've been thinking about that. What if the reason conquest doesn't work with certain species isn't because they're militarily superior, but because they've evolved past the point where conquest makes sense as a concept? General Klobnik's mechanical head tilted thoughtfully. Explain. Well, she continued, warming to her subject, humans have been conquering and being conquered for thousands of years. We've gotten really good at it. But we've also gotten good at absorbing conquerors and turning them into neighbors. The Romans conquered half the known world, but eventually everyone became Roman, including the conquerors. The Mongols built the largest empire in history, but their descendants became part of the cultures they'd conquered. Conquest works until the conquered species figures out how to make conquest irrelevant. Admiral Fliswick pulsed thoughtfully. You're suggesting that certain species have evolved beyond being conquerable? Not exactly. I'm suggesting that certain species have evolved to be so adaptable and inclusive that conquest becomes indistinguishable from immigration. You can't conquer someone who immediately assumes you must be a potential friend who just doesn't know the local customs yet. Dr. Morblix Grex performed a complex dance that roughly translated to mind blown with positive implications. Commander Vex Karloth stared at his paperwork, which had somehow transformed from military reports into what humans called project proposals and cultural exchange budgets. So you're saying that our military might have been obsolete before we ever left our home systems? Not obsolete, Dr. Hammerstrike Quantum said gently, just repurposed. Your people have incredible skills: organization, technology, strategic thinking, discipline. Those skills are incredibly valuable. They just don't have to be used for conquest anymore. The universe is a big place, she continued, and there's more than enough room for everyone to find something interesting to do that doesn't involve subjugating each other. Your biotechnic assimilators are helping humans develop better prosthetics. Your quantum infiltrators are revolutionizing food criticism. Your extinction force is creating art that helps people process existential anxiety. A beep bloop error nodded enthusiastically. The humans seem to believe that everyone has something valuable to contribute. They just need to find the right context for their skills. Plus, Dr. Hammerstrike Quantum added with a grin, you guys are a lot more fun than we expected. Did you know that Captain Grimjaw Murderface's wrestling persona has inspired a whole new generation of human performers? And major Brainfry Nightmares advertising campaigns are being studied in business schools as examples of ethical persuasion techniques. General Klobnik's cooling fans whirred happily. Ethical persuasion? Turns out that mind control techniques work a lot better when you use them to help people make decisions that are actually good for them. Who knew? Admiral Fliswick pulsed with what was definitely amusement. So instead of conquering Earth, we've accidentally revolutionized their entertainment, technology, food, advertising, environmental protection, education, and art industries. Pretty much, Dr. Hammerstrike Quantum confirmed, though I wouldn't call it an accident. I think this was inevitable once two sufficiently creative species encountered each other. Doctor, Morblix Grex's tentacles formed what was clearly the sign for beautiful chaos. Commander Vex Karloth looked around the room at his fellow council members, all of whom seemed more relaxed and content than he'd ever seen them, then at Dr. Hammerstrike Quantum, who had somehow turned their greatest military failure into what humans called a win-win situation. Dr. Hammerstrike Quantum, he said formally, on behalf of the Galactic Cultural Exchange and Friendship Initiative, I would like to officially thank humanity for teaching us that there are more interesting things to do in the universe than conquest. On behalf of humanity, she replied with equal formality, I'd like to thank you for being the most entertainingly dramatic friends we've ever made. Also, the coffee machine was a really nice touch. Beep bloop error raised one chrome appendage. Should I prepare a formal report for the High Command? Yes, Commander Vex Karloth said, then paused thoughtfully. But this time, let's include the recipe for human coffee. I have a feeling it's going to be essential for future diplomatic operations. As the meeting dispersed, each member heading off to their various new responsibilities in this strange new universe where invasion fleets had become cultural exchange programs and military hierarchies had become collaborative partnerships, Commander Vex Karloth remained behind to update the mission log. His final entry read, Operation status complete. Earth successfully, well, not conquered exactly, but definitely changed. Also changed everything else. Recommend immediate implementation of Friendship Protocol across all galactic military operations. Side note, humans correct about coffee being essential for diplomatic success. Request immediate supply increase. He paused, then added, Personal note. Never thought I'd say this, but failure has never been so thoroughly successful. The universe is much more interesting when you're not trying to conquer it. 3 years later, the Galactic Cultural Exchange and Friendship Initiative had grown into the largest interspecies organization in recorded history, with exchange programs, collaborative research projects, and what humans called really excellent potluck dinners happening across 47 different star systems. The annual Failed Conquest Success Stories Conference had become the most popular diplomatic event in the galaxy, where former military commanders shared stories about how their invasion attempts had accidentally led to breakthrough scientific discoveries, revolutionary art movements, and unprecedented levels of interspecies cooperation. Captain Grimjaw Murderface's Wrestling Federation had expanded to include competitors from 18 different species, and his motto, Friendship Through Combat, had become a galactic phenomenon. Major brain-fry Nightmares advertising agency, now specialized in what he called ethical manipulation for universal benefit, and his campaigns for galactic literacy, environmental protection, and what humans termed mental health awareness, had improved quality of life across thousands of worlds. The quantum infiltrators had opened restaurants on 43 planets, and their interdimensional cuisine had become so popular that several star systems had established food tourism as their primary industry. The Biotechnic Assimilators technology company had revolutionized medicine, communication, and transportation across the galaxy, while maintaining what they called strict ethical guidelines about consent and user autonomy. Soon, the Plasma Core elite had established theme parks that combined education, entertainment, and what humans called character development in ways that had never been attempted before. The Void Hunters had become the galaxy's premier experts on sustainable food production, turning their hunting skills into techniques for ethical farming and what they called respectful resource management. The Cosmic Dread Brigade's motivational seminars had helped millions of beings across the galaxy learn to embrace uncertainty as an opportunity for growth, leading to unprecedented levels of psychological well-being and creative problem-solving. The Apocalypse Bringers had become the galaxy's leading environmental restoration specialists, using their expertise in planetary destruction to develop revolutionary techniques for planetary healing. The Temporal Disruption Unit had established the Galactic Institute for Applied Chronology, where they taught responsible time travel techniques and helped resolve temporal paradoxes for civilizations across the galaxy. And Overlord Doomskull Catastrophe had become the galaxy's most beloved philosopher, whose books on finding joy in cosmic insignificance and the art of beautiful endings had helped countless beings find peace with mortality and meaning in existence. Commander Vex Karloth, now Director of Interspecies Relations, often reflected on how their greatest military failure had become their greatest diplomatic success. The universe, it turned out, was much more interesting when you approached it with curiosity rather than conquest. But perhaps the most remarkable development was that humanity had taught the galaxy something that no amount of military technology could achieve, that the most effective way to change the universe was to invite it to change you in return. And somewhere in the vast cosmic bureaucracy, a filing cabinet contained a report that simply read, "Mission Conquer Earth. Result, Earth conquered us. Recommend immediate implementation across all future operations."